the powers that be rather deal with a few corporations so they can manipulate each other more effectively instead of dealing with the noise of a whole lot of small companies. They don't really care about small business, and if they can make everybody else drones, my philosophy always been is they want to bring back the feudal system again.
And good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining us. Today, I'm with Bob Kudla, tradelikeagenius.com. As always, we try to get together each month to discuss our different specialties, either in the financial markets with Bob and myself with the Grand Solar Minimum, and these different effects that are now showing themselves. Because whether you're in the economy, history, solar activity, agriculture, they're all dovetailing into, there's massive changes going on, and it's just all of us sharing information or trying to explain things as a wider picture together. So each of our conversations every month is about trying to foreshadow maybe what's coming in the next month based on what's happening and the sort of a greater scheme of things. Now, this program today, just as we were talking before, I'm going to name this one The Narrative of Shortages, because wherever you look across the landscape, every other news article is shortage of something, record high price of this. Yet those on the street really haven't earned much more other than basic income handouts. So at some point, the rubber's going to meet the road. And with the new mandates saying you're going to have to go back to work, you're not going to get the unemployment anymore. When people really go back to work and they start working for their money again and they have to pay out of pocket, they're going to see these huge spikes in price really start to affect them. And I'm wondering, as we get toward that era of the next month or two, how it's going to affect society when people go, no, I'm not going to pay double for that. I was getting free money from the government, but now I got to work hard and get the money, and now it's double price. No, hold on. So where we're looking, we're going to discuss today, the exports from the United States and agriculture, the fuel shortages I'm seeing here in the east part of the U.S. I can describe that for you a little bit, but Bob, thanks for joining me. And I'm sure today's program, with all that's been happening in this last month, is really going to be interesting, especially how you and I both see moving out into the future a little bit. And by the way, can you tell us where you are right now and what we're going to watch over the next hour or a half hour as the light glows behind you?
The background behind me is actually the mountain of Mauna Kea. So we should be seeing the sunrise as we're as we're talking. Hopefully not the sunrise, but we'll see the dawn breaking. But good topic. It's been the topic du jour for us over at Trade Genius because it presents opportunity for us, amidst tragedy. I can't stop these things, but I can certainly figure out how to profit from them. And what we're seeing here is really interesting. It really all started last September when I think the fix was probably in. The Fed said they're not going to raise interest rates. I mean, they said basically it's going to be a cold day in hell before they raise interest rates. And the market started to take off, and inflation expectations started to, what they call the real rate of inflation started to take off with that. And then when Biden got elected, they just know that the Democrats are going to do the spray and pray with the money, and all of a sudden the whole commodity complex started to lift off and lift higher. And so we have all the industrial metals are at at least decade highs. Precious metals are as subdued as they are. Gold already hit an all-time high, and so and now it's breaking back out of its consolidation, and silver is actually positive for the last 12 months. So I think we all expected more from that. And I think that's coming because I'm going to talk about something that happened last week that I think is a game changer for silver. But let's just back up here in terms of looking at these different commodities. So the Bitcoin miners realized that if they could hold their tokens or coins off market versus dumping them into Coinbase, they can be a more profitable company. And I think other people started to notice that. And then all of a sudden in uranium, and if I could pound the table on one metal, it's going to be uranium. It has basically the buyers have to buy and the sellers have a shortage. And so I think you're going to see prices just like And I reference 2002 to 2008 on uranium. You'll see, 2 to 800% moves in a lot of the miners. So you got uranium going, and then now you have this conflict we're having in the, with ongoing conflict with Russia. Well, they control the platinum and palladium markets, and then you have Russia basically saying, "Hey, we're putting export controls on our wheat." You have Argentina saying we're going to put export controls on our wheat. You have Russia saying we're going to put export controls on our gasoline. You have now the Taiwanese and the Greeks saying, "Hey, we're not bringing our ships back online." In copper, you have basically prices were so subdued for so long, there was no new mines. And then with the virus hitting, they shut a lot of these mines down. And now you have a copper shortage. And I can go on and on and on and on. But the one that really intrigued me was last week when Mexico shut down the silver mines. And I think it was as much political as anything else, because they're like, hey, everybody else is getting theirs. Why aren't we getting ours? Why are the bankers stealing from us? And silver took a pop. And so I think you have this whole thing where now people are like, hey, we can hold this stuff off market. When we could borrow money at basically 0%, big players, and we could hold stuff off market, and we're getting 5, 10, 12, 15% monthly moves. It's a no-brainer. It's like you being able to buy a house, on a corner where that they're going to be putting in a major employment center, right? And you can borrow at 0%. You can wait it out a year or two, and your house will double or triple or quadruple. That's what this is like with the commodities, because everybody knows who's a player, knows how long it takes to bring on new supply, and the demand is artificial because they're just holding off market. Basically, Goldman Sachs used to do this. It used to be the exclusive playground of the bankers. Well, now countries are doing it. And I think this is going to have some staying power, Dave.
I'd agree. And this whole term transitory inflation or transitory hyperinflation that our Fed in the US is willing to deal and then blow a huge, hammer, sledgehammer to your toe to the American people, going, we're going to cause inflation so all of your prices rise up, and there's nothing you can do about it. So when you're having the federal level saying we're going to raise your prices on purpose to help the corporations, wait, hold on a second. And that's supposed to be by the people, for the people? I don't think so. But these shortages continue. And wherever you look in agriculture, since, you're out in California, I did quite a lengthy showing of the drought map and where it was and which areas in agriculture were going to be affected. Some areas are down 95% in their allocated water. And we're talking about some of the major growing areas that produce almost all the veg and produce for the US are going to be going 95% reduction. What's that going to do for the prices? Is that going to push us down to Mexico to then get produce and bring it up this direction here? And then also the shipping pallets, the wooden crates on the bottom that you stack things on. They're saying there's a shortage in that because the lumber prices are so high that people are recycling those and they're storing them somehow. The same weird excuses for all the containers going offline, and Hapgood Lloyd needing to order 150,000 new containers. There's just a lot of shenanigans going on with the shipping and logistics. The price rises that are for you and I that are in the whole agricultural sphere, whether it's the export restrictions or the new tariffs for inbound, or just the actual physical medium to get it from point A to point B. It seems that there's some problem that's showing. And now, that used to be the realm of business news, but now it's the realm of CNN front page, BBC front page. Now it's all over in the UK. They're going to be stopping all the rail traffic because there's cracks in the tracks, and they're going to be reducing rail traffic for the next 3 to 6 weeks. And everywhere you look, there's some kind of weirdness in transportation, logistics, and it's as if the inflation's going to play into the delays, and the delays play into the inflation, and all of this spirals up into the full explanation of why everything's rising so fast in price, when nobody's really looking at the sun, and nobody's looking at the amount of volcanic ash in the air, and nobody's talking why in Tennessee it's still fall temperatures and we're almost in the middle of May, and it's in the low 40s in the evening where you're putting coats on to go outside.
Hello, it's 63 degrees right now.
Yeah,
here in Mauna Kea, in Waikoloa at the ocean. So it's chilly. You can't see it, but there's about 10-degree breeze blowing. at my back. I mean, it's marvelous. I'm not complaining about this weather, but you don't usually wear long sleeve shirts here in late spring, early summer in Hawaii. The powers that be rather deal with a few corporations so they can manipulate each other more effectively instead of dealing with the noise of a whole lot of small companies. They don't really care about small business, and if they can make everybody else drones, my philosophy always been is they want to bring back the feudal system again. Basically, the overlord, you have the sycophants, you have the merchant class, you have the protection class, and then everybody else. I mean, look, the dudes from the World Economic Forum have all but said it. They don't like all this. They don't like all the hoi polloi out there trying to have their say. They want to have their say, and I ultimately think it's not going to work for them. But that's what they're trying. And I think governments like inflation because basically it's a free tax, and you can blame somebody else for the tax. I don't think they thought that so many people would just stay home from work and just collect money. I saw that 1.8 million job postings, that people are desperate for employees, yet the government is becoming a competitor to these corporations, these small businesses to get workers. And I think it was a backhanded way of trying to get the minimum wage up. But what they're going to find is that out here in Hawaii, that just some places just aren't opening, or they're limiting their capacity to the number of employees they have, or limiting their menu, or they're automating, and they're changing their business practices. And I think it's going to bite them in the ass eventually. So, yeah, I think all this is contrived, Dave. Look at lumber, right? I guess across the border in Canada, you just have these mountains, these lumber mountains sitting up there that aren't coming across. Why? Nobody can tell us. They can't bring it in the U.S. to do that because there's laws against it, but they sure are doing it other places. The uranium miners are actually mining and putting it off to the side. One of the stocks that we own called Quad U, that's UU, they're selling their rare earths that they're mining, but they're holding uranium off the market. And so basically they're creating this environment where, it's just like home selling. At some point in time, prices will get so high that the volume will drop off. That's when you know it's going to end. But I don't think we're anywhere close. You look at copper. Copper's been in a multi-decade rectangle. It's breaking through that. It's probably gonna double the range it had last decade. And there's nothing anybody can do about it. Joe Biden wants a Green New Deal. Well, guess what? They're going to pay up for the copper. And guess what? That's going to kill the housing markets. These guys don't understand the levers. They just think we'll just dictate this and all will be good. Oh, we haven't even talked about chip shortages. From out of Taiwan, the automotive industry. 1 out of every 4 jobs is indirectly or directly related to car manufacturing. Germany's even more. And so there's some big problems. And, let's talk China. China's in a world of hurt. They can't produce enough food right now. I don't know if you and I talked about this. We talk about this so much time. But the farmers here are feeding their animals wheat instead of corn because it's more profitable for them to send the corn over to China so they can feed their pigs.
Yeah, and if you notice, the background's a tiny bit different. Internet went down in Hawaii, so we're trying to re-record this now and continue with our conversation. Right where we dropped off, Bob was talking about unemployment and the amount of money. And I had read some reports where people now, with everything they're getting from unemployment to the physical stimulus and all the different bonuses and tiers of income replacement that are in different states, some states, people are making up $17, $18 an hour clear after tax. Now, think about that. If you were making $7 an hour and you had to pay tax and go to some of these jobs, and suddenly you're making 17, 18 clear on the tax, would you go back to work? I know I probably wouldn't either. But think about that for a second. So somebody who's making, let's say, $10 an hour, they're used to making that wage. Now they're getting 18. They suddenly have a lot more money in the pocket. Now, I know some people would run out and spend it on new TVs and XYZ. But if you did have a few extra dollars, Bob, because, we're talking about pennies turning into hundreds or thousands of dollars in market returns over near, short, and long term, depending if it's crypto or if it's traditional markets, whatever you see out there, because your crystal ball into that arena of finance is quite deep. It's almost you have a crystal ball within a crystal ball, the way you guys are laser sighting and niching down in on things there. So even if you had a few extra dollars, what would you be thinking right now? Obviously, you're not going to be doing rhodium options and sort of thing with a few extra dollars, but is there a possibility with somebody who has a little bit of extra money to then use that to try to, put something in the game to build their own wealth?
Yeah, look, if somebody wants to stick money in and let it sit for the next 12 to 18 months, I would absolutely tell them to buy any of the uranium stocks. Uranium's in a really interesting situation right now because there's basically inelastic supply and there's inelastic demand, meaning that there's not enough supply and demand is voracious. And they'll buy it at any price because they're trying to refuel the nuclear power plants for the next decade. And I think there's 53 new nuke plants since the last refueling binge that we had in the early part of this century. 2002 to 2008 saw the price of CCJ go up, I think 8x. And I think you're going to see those kind of moves again. Now, we've been in these guys now for the last, I guess we're coming on 7 months now, and we had doubles and triples, but there's still doubles and triples left in these names, and in some cases maybe 400%. So yeah, I would tell people uranium for sure. And look, and silver's been a laggard. Although silver's gone up, I hate when people say, "Oh, silver's not making." People making money in silver, but I think the expectation was we'd go back to what happened in 2011, where basically silver blew the top off, and we're going to get there. So people can put money to use in silver, and I think that'd be a good place to go. Where you don't want to be going, there's a transition going. Since the time you and I fritzed on our interview, the stock market has taken a pretty good tumble, and it's because we're at a point now where those stocks that have been carrying the market can no longer lead the market. They're just too overvalued. They're worried now about the Biden administration's policies. They think that maybe the best is behind us, but what we're really seeing is rotation. So you're going to rotate out of tech, you're going to rotate into commodities. And when I mean commodities, I'm talking steel, energy, platinum, palladium, uranium, gold, silver, copper, fertilizer. I don't think I missed anything. And really ironic thing, Dave, near and dear to both of our hearts is that the fertilizer stocks have been holding up extremely well during all this. Mosaic didn't even have a down day this week. And I think that's because, again, in inelastic supply, inelastic demand, farmers got to dump that stuff on their fields, and there's not enough fertilizer being mined out of Canada and out of Kazakhstan. So those are the areas I think are tremendous opportunities for people. And I think the lockdowns are ending.
Well, I want to dovetail onto the fertilizer comments. So with the pipeline outage here, the diesel fuel has come into a shorter supply than the gasoline shortage has, or the gasoline. When we first talked a couple of days ago, Tennessee stations had abundant supplies of fuel, but just when I drove up to Knoxville yesterday, I stopped in a country station out here that usually always have fuel. Like, these countryside areas are the last things to experience disturbances, but all the pumps had the bags on them. So there's a knock on here where the diesel jumped up to $3.99, and the farmers, because it frosted last night, it's expected to frost tonight again, which is extremely rare in May. Farmers are putting their planting on hold at the moment yet again, knowing that the frost is coming in. And some of them were looking at the fuel price rise as a blessing in disguise, because they were going to plant, but since the prices jumped and this unexpected frost is sweeping down on another kind of the last Arctic blast, hopefully of the season, you really have to wonder if it's 41 degrees in East Tennessee in the evening at frost level here. What's going to happen with places further north where it's even colder? What's been planted in the ground already? And if they do have to replant and get those plants to grow extremely quick to get them back up to some maturation so we could harvest in the normal times, how much extra potash is that going to require? How much extra fertilizer? How much are they really going to have to juice the plants this year to get them to grow? because I'm really shaking my head where covering plants in the middle of May due to frost. This is an exceptional time we're in right now. And if you look at the global temperature analysis, it seems to be dropping. Even on the super hot models like Climate Reanalyzer, they're still showing global temperature drops for the second month in a row, actually third, if you count an even 0.0 as a drop. But things just aren't panning out on the sides. And, you're looking at late snows and late frosts all across Europe and early onset of winter, extreme brutal cold down in Australia with incredible storms, both wind and water, rain events. So it doesn't really matter what pole you're looking at, northern or southern. So if you think that you're going to get some sort of magic bailout from Australia that's going to, take off and say, hey, we're going to give all this extra exported food out to the world because I know you in the Northern Hemisphere can't grow it. You opened up with the show talking about the export restrictions out of Argentina and how many other countries are going to follow suit, excuse me, right at the end of the year when they really realize that, everything is getting a little tighter. So we can't rely on the world like we used to any longer. And we can't rely on the climate either. So then where does that leave us?
Yeah, it is because the currencies are going to get, our people aren't going to trust the currency moves either. So, they're going to demand hard asset kind of trade balances. And so it's going to be really interesting to, to see where this goes. Look, Russia has export bans on wheat right now too, or at least export controls, not just for that, but also for gasoline. People don't realize, all our nitrogen fertilizers come from natural gas. So the Biden administration trying to limit the fracking in the United States is basically eliminating our ability to create fertilizer here as well. Now, companies are going to have to bring more inventory forward and to hold. So that's going to affect profitability until those inventories are substantial again. Number one. Number two is that people are going to have to reset their expectations. And I don't mean that your lifestyle needs to collapse. You just have to kind of think it through a little bit. I remember when I was a kid, is that we got things on our birthday and Christmas.
And good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining us. Today, I'm with Bob Kudla, tradelikeagenius.com. As always, we try to get together each month to discuss our different specialties, either in the financial markets with Bob and myself with the Grand Solar Minimum, and these different effects that are now showing themselves. Because whether you're in the economy, history, solar activity, agriculture, they're all dovetailing into, there's massive changes going on. And it's just all of us sharing information or trying to explain things as a wider picture together.
People don't realize, all our nitrogen fertilizers come from natural gas. So the Biden administration trying to limit the fracking in the United States is basically eliminating our ability to create fertilizer here as well. So when the people that are watching this thing are kind of Green New Dealing their brain a little bit, they have to understand, your food comes from this stuff too. It's just not transportation. It's your ability to heat your home and also to feed your family. And so these knock-on effects, I think this is why we're starting to get jiggy here, is that, the Biden administration is replete with activists. And with Joe not really being at home, these people are like pushing the agendas of their own personal pet projects. And they don't think about knock-on, which means what's the second derivative of their action. They only think about what they want. These are children, and I want what I want because I want what I want. They don't realize that, hey, by doing this, oh, by the way, people aren't going to go to work, right? So you have an employment problem. Oh, by shutting off fracking, oh, well, guess what? Now we don't have a supply, X, Y, Z, it just goes down the line. Oh, we're going to make you use renewables. Well, Texas has, people freezing to death because wind shut down and they wouldn't let them cross FERC lines to bring in cheaper energy from across the United States. So on and on it goes because they have an agenda. But people's real lives are at risk here. And I think what's going to happen here, Dave, is that It's going to be really interesting. All the stuff ties together. So you have all of a sudden now you have Ohio saying we're ending lockdowns completely. All the restrictions. California ending it completely. The CDC now is on defense. In a year and a half, all the truth starts pouring out because the Biden administration realizes they're going to get their asses handed to them on the next election if they keep going down this path because the polling data is atrocious. The soccer mom is the swing vote in the country, and Biden administration has lost the soccer mom. She can't send her kids to school. She can't send her kids to camp. She can't let her kids play. Okay, and now food's getting expensive. She can't feed her family. All right. Oh, and then she's scared out of her wits because they're letting these crazy people run around these cities doing this random act.
Yeah, and the swing vote might also, in addition, be the soccer mom, the computer code that never disappears. Oh, did I say that? That's too risque. Sorry, Bob. Let's continue. Yeah, with everything rising in price, can you imagine when the food doubles and people's unemployment is taken away and they have to go find jobs again and get reduced back down to from $18 an hour back to 10, or from 17 down to 9 or 8 again to the regular minimum wage? And people become accustomed so quickly in these last 6 months of having double wages. I mean, can you imagine you and I, if we lived on a double wage, how you're like, wow, well, you'd be able to accrue so quickly. Now, how is it going to be psychologically for people to get stepped back down into the reality again of you have to go work for your money, but at the same time, your cost of most things has doubled. And I don't know how many times you have conversations with people that just randomly, oh, the food's expensive. Oh, this is expensive. And I want to add one fuel, the fuel to the fire, no pun intended. The fuel from the refineries that wasn't making into the pipelines down here in the Southeast US, they were trying to put into barges or store it anywhere on water, get it floated off so they could still have the refined products to then take off the barges or the ships and then put it back in the pipelines once they reopen, which they are sort of right now. But everything filled up and there was a lack of any types of storage, even on water. 2 refineries had shuttered operations in the last day completely. There was nowhere for them to put anything. So now it's the bottleneck going backward of, all right, the pipeline needs to get refilled because it pretty much was drained out and the storage tanks were drained and the onward destinations of everything has been, used up and utilized. All right, well, that all has to refill in addition to what people are still psychologically overbuying. It's going to take more than a few days to get stabilization on the guaranteed gas is back in the station again. But now we got to go one step back where the refineries have now shuttered. So, I know whether it be a nuclear plant, electrical production plant, coal burning power plant, refinery, they just don't come back on in a day. It takes them quite some time to ramp up and, safety and get operations and pressures and everything back up. So even if you turn off and shutter they just actually literally turned off the production in these refineries. Like, we got to shut everything down. There's nowhere to put it. We can't bring in, everything's full. We got to stop. And in addition, those cracks in the bridge over the Mississippi. So I was talking about the cracks coming more and more as we get into this crossing magnetic field line in July of this year. And from that point forward, you're going to see a lot more earth cracks, rifts. And these are the exact same things I was talking about. And John Casey references quite a bit too in his book Upheaval. When we come into these magnetic anomalies and we get into these grand solar minimum effects where our Earth's crust is affected magnetically, the Earth is going to shift in the top 1 to 2 miles generally. You're going to have the big earthquakes, big volcanoes. Okay, that's its own separate subset. What the set of circumstances here is breaking bridges, ripping pipelines, electrical conduits ripped, and railroad tracks and highways separating by anywhere from a couple feet to a couple hundred feet. And here we have Mississippi tearing on the bridges where they're shutting down bridges over the Mississippi. Okay, if it's not going by pipeline, it's going to be coming by road. There's another bottleneck in supply, and you can already see this coming. UK is shutting down an enormous amount of rail tracks because there are cracks in the rail tracks. Magically, all these cracks are starting to happen right when we're coming to this magnetic field coupling in July of 2021. From that point forward, it's going to get super intense to 2024. We're going to have all kinds of things ripping, breaking, and so I really think this is just a very, very taste in the beginning of what the world's going to experience in terms of supply chain disruptions. So how do you protect yourself against that? Because nobody expected the refineries would shut. They always thought they had extra capacity there. So I don't know what's going to happen when we start to get more rips and cracks. We got the pipeline shut down. You got, like talking about fracking, although I'm not a fan of contaminating water tables, if it could be done in a different fashion, to get natural gas production. But wow, we're getting into so many corners right now. I feel like, there's so many things going wrong that are pushing us to a corner here. And I just don't know how, money is a great way to do it. Resources, food, stored water, ways to be able to buy other things that you're going to need in the transition points moving through when you see the changes. But I don't know, I'll leave it there. Kind of a lot to throw out at you, but I'm sure you have an answer, that's some thoughts about that.
The answer is yes. That's a joke. You ever watch those Japanese movies where they translate in English and the guy goes on for like 20 minutes and they translate yes in English. So yeah, look, that's called the Slinkey Effect. And we talked about this before. Actually, what's been happening is kind of a blessing in disguise, because people have a chance to kind of wake up here on, this pandemic was not as bad as it could have been. And so now people have to start realizing that we've been really, really spoiled, I think, over the last 50 years in terms of uninterrupted supply chains. Get whatever you want to eat whenever you want to eat it. Get whatever you want to order whenever you want to order it. And the pandemic has shifted that. The things that are happening in the earth is shifting that, and the global solar minimum is shifting that. But also the economic, basically the reversion to the mean here. You're just starting to see supply chain disruption. So now companies are going to have to bring more inventory forward and to hold. So that's going to affect profitability until those inventories are substantial again. Number one. Number two is that people are going to have to reset their expectations, and I don't mean that your lifestyle needs to collapse. You just have to kind of think it through a little bit. I remember when I was a kid, is that we got things on our birthday and Christmas. Now, I talk to people and say, I just buy what I want when I want to buy it. And now people have to go back to kind of thinking through when they really want something and plan for it again. And I think, once you reset those expectations, you're in good shape. And the same with trading, that something's changed this week. Okay. So we've gone from what they call the buy to dip mentality to now we're going to get into what's called the sell to rip mentality, meaning that as prices push up higher, it'll hit these ceilings. That's where you need to take profit, or if you're having a position, you're able to short it or go against the market going higher. You're going to see more of that because prices need to reset now to reflect this new world we're in. And this cheap financing that the governments have been living on and people have been living on, that's going to change too, because, for every person that benefits on a cheaper financing, a saver gets screwed. And so that has to come back into balance. And that, as that comes into balance, the price stock market PE values are going to fall, and this is going to basically bring the market all down. So, people need to understand that we're living in weird times. The last 10 years is not normal, and we're going to go back to normal. Normal is going to feel awful because we've been living in Hawaii, and now you got to fly back to Bismarck in November, So that's what people are going to have to start dealing with, is the basically getting back to what's called normal. And it's not going to feel good, but that's the way it's going to be. And I think, Dave, too, what's really going to throw people off is that, look, we're going into the global solar minimum, but, it looks like the MJOs in Indian Ocean are saying, hey, we may get an El Nino flare up this year. So everybody's going to say, hey, everything's back to normal again. And then the El Nino cycles through back to another La Nina going into 2023, then into 2024 low, then I think people are really going to be shocked. So you get these recency effects of saying, oh, hey, everything's cool again, and then we're going to get hit with the second harder hit. And so I think both our monologues are basically saying to people is that you got to start thinking again. You just can't throw a dart at the stock market and make money. You can't just call Amazon to get what you want when you want it. And I think you'll be fine. But you need to be smart. Like I'm here in California, not at the moment, but normally, and we keep about a month to 6 weeks worth of food on hand, canned food, dry goods, frozen foods, because we have very real issues here in terms of earthquakes, not just necessarily supply disruptions. But if we start getting supply disruptions and people aren't going to travel through the cities to deliver because it's going to become escape from New York, is that it's going to disrupt people's ability to get stuff in the grocery store. So people need to start getting smart. And what you're doing is awesome. So if you have a chance to grow a garden, grow a garden. If you have a chance to be on a farm, be on a farm. If you have a chance to get out of the city, get out of the city. And you'll be fine.
Any one suggestion for that? More compost, the better for the garden. You might think, wow, it's so thick and fluffy. Look how great that soil looks. But once it rains a bunch and it gets compacted down, use double or triple what you think it might be. Go out and get a ton of it. Instead of getting, 10 bags on sale, go fill up the back of a pickup truck or rent it, have somebody come out and drop 5 tons on your land out there, 3 tons, whatever it would be. Compost doesn't smell. It's already been decomposed down. But, thinking about that, remember when we were kids and you did have the stores had inventory in the back room back there, or there were warehouses around the cities for different places, or half the store's actual floor space was the storage in the back. Anybody who's, the younger kids are going to have a more difficult, or the younger generation will have a more difficult time dealing with it because they've grown up in this whole instantaneous buy. They didn't live through, oh, you do need to wait for 2 weeks, come back and we'll get it for you. Okay, you got ordered out 3 weeks. Okay. And you kind of, you're excited in the beginning, then you forget. Oh, no, then it arrives that day. And you're like, wow, I got it. The psychological change is going through this time too, in addition to the financial changes and everything else. I mean, there's going to be a lot of intergenerational mixing of mind thoughts happening during this time, because we can readjust to a slower style because we lived through it once. So it's easier. It's like riding the bike. You forget, you ride the bike and then you get a car and then you can ride a bike again if you need to. But somebody who's never ridden a bike suddenly gets thrown into that. It's very different. So, maybe we're lucky that we grew up through that era so we could see it transition to the instantaneous era. And if we need to go back, we could go up either road there and still be fine.
I have a 20-year-old daughter, and I'll take exception to the one thing that you said with respect, is that these kids aren't as materialistic as probably the generation between when you and I were kids and my daughter, and they're more into experiences. Like my daughter, she's happy as a clam just hanging out with her friends and not even doing anything, just kind of hanging out and screwing around, doing TikToks and stuff like that, and so I find it interesting because I'm always kind of judging the future by, and she's very typical. I mean, and look, she goes to college. She's graduating this year. Just yesterday, she just texted us that I was offered my job back. We're opening again. So 14 months without work, and she has a very specific skill, so she couldn't just go anywhere else. And they called her back, said we're reopening in July. And so, but for her, hey, we're gonna go hang out at grab some Dunkin', go down to the beach, kind of a thing. That's, these kids are more into just like hanging, and which I think is probably good. If that's the expectation of, there won't be material things, so get used to enjoying experiences. So I don't know, I just want to throw that out. Maybe your listeners have similar experiences. I don't think my daughter is anything special, and I just kind of observe and just to kind of test against, how I was like, you and I were kids. We got on our bikes and came home at night. We had a different form of nothing. Our experiences were eyeballs. These kids, they see the world through TikTok, so.
Yeah, you're on the beach, hanging out, and there's a baby octopus. You whip at one of your friends, it sticks on their back. That's kind of good fun when you're a kid.
Yeah. Now you go to jail for that kind of stuff.
Don't pull the legs off of Daddy Long Leg. You get arrested.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I know. It's cruelty to spiders. So
yeah.
But
All right.
hey,
And anyway, I'll put the link below to reach out to Bob here, tradegeniusacademy.com. You can start right there and see what might work for you if you're looking for education or if you're looking for guidance. There's a whole array of what you might find there, what we talked about tonight. And if you want to take some action and move forward with
tremendous opportunities right now. When there's dislocation, there's opportunity. So the crypto space is firing. Now alts are moving. In the stock market, we're going from this dull FANG environment to now commodities, and so and it's always a good time to learn a new skill. Once you learn how to trade, you have a life skill. You're never unemployed, and so we can help you get there. But check us out, tradelikeagenius.com. Got specials running this Saturday, and join a real good group of people that we all kind of think the same way.
All right, Bob, thanks for your insights for this week, and hope everybody got something out of our talk. But if you didn't, I can sum it up in one word: prepare. Maybe that wouldn't be the best way to sum it up.